Good evening. Joseph D. Roman, Joe, is President and Chief Executive Officer of Greater Cleveland Partnership, one of the nation's largest metropolitan chambers of commerce with more than 8,000 members. The partnership's current areas of focus include preserving competitive air service at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, helping to reform the Cleveland Metropolitan School District and public education in the city, and continuing to support the development of Cleveland's downtown business district, lakefront, and other major projects throughout the region. Roman previously served as Executive Director of Cleveland Tomorrow, an organization that was committed to pursuing projects and initiatives that were fundamental to the long-term economic vitality of the region. During his tenure, Cleveland Tomorrow was recognized by Harvard Business School as one of the most innovative and successful regional business organizations in the country. Roman also helped to found critical economic development organizations in the region, such as BioEnterprise, Jumpstart, and the Cleveland Plus Marketing Alliance. Earlier in his career, Roman worked on Capitol Hill as both a congressional staff person and as a lobbyist for manufacturing trade associations. He has a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York and a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University. He is Vice President of the Cleveland 2016 Host Committee and immediate past chair of the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. Joe was born in Cleveland and has spent most of his career there. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce to you Joe Roman.
Hello, everybody. Talked a little bit about this. I haven't been back to Middletown Monroe for about 13 or 14 years, and a lot of you during the announcements, introductions, talked about having an education background. So I'll just fess up. I was serving a penance on the state school board, courtesy of appointments by Governor Voinovich and Governor Taft, and I got stuck chairing the committee that split up Middletown and Monroe School District. The only more difficult committee I ever chaired while I was on the board was I chaired the committee that created the science standards way back when. And one of the most controversial parts of the science standards back then, and many of you educators know that it is still a controversial topic, and that's the topic of evolution. I remember being in a meeting of 1,000 people, 500 that said we shouldn't teach evolution, 500 that said we should. We're taking public testimony, so everybody that comes up has to fill in a card, say where they live, say their name. They have to be an Ohio resident. Got 2 state highway patrol guys there making sure that, because it was kind of heated. And I see this thing coming up the line, getting ready to talk to us, tries to come up and speak to the state school board, dressed in an ape suit. And he refused to take off his head dress, so we didn't let him speak, and it just about started a riot, and we had to close down the committee meeting at that time. So other than that, Middletown Monroe was in my memory. What we just saw 2 months ago were most of us, enough of us, turning away from career politicians. And what's happened to this country over the last 100 years is all of you, your predecessors, and the people who follow you, connected to chambers. I have the greatest book in my office is a set of minutes from the 1896 Chamber of Commerce meeting in Cleveland. Rockefeller was there. What's happened is we've stopped getting involved in politics. We don't run for public office any longer. The Constitution actually created mechanisms for us to do that. Back in the early days of this country, It was known and expected that people would leave their business, run for office, serve a term, and go back to their business. We stopped doing that. You heard reference to an organization I previously worked for called Cleveland Tomorrow. Cleveland Tomorrow was the business group that George Voinovich helped to create that started to bring CEO attention back to the city. They had vacated for that do-nothing era as well, just as much to blame, in my opinion. They came back, and we spent a good 20 years fixing our airport, getting back to our neighborhoods, worrying about facilities like art museums and cultural facilities. You know, we all know we lost the Cleveland Browns for a few years. You know that Cleveland almost lost all 3 professional sports teams in a period of but 4 years. In 1989, the American League told the Cleveland Indians to move. The Cleveland Cavaliers, who we are certainly glad stayed, but the Cleveland Cavaliers were playing in an arena 30 miles outside of Cleveland with no lease and a 0 mortgage on that building for the owner, meaning they could have gone anywhere they wanted. And the Cleveland Browns did leave. So within a very short period, but what happened? Your equivalents in Cleveland, working with the public sector in Cleveland, did not let that happen. I really believe that, and I'm so glad to see so many of the elected officials here, I don't think anything happens of scale in a community or with any sustainability in a community if it doesn't have a public-private partnership root to it. Because it's just too easy to upset. When both of those sectors are involved and committed and engaged, things happen and they have staying power. And that's what we did during that era of Cleveland. I now like to think we're in the vault ahead era. We've seen $17 billion worth of investment in our city in the last couple years. We did not win the lottery ticket when the Republican host committee decided to choose Cleveland for the 2016 convention. We really earned it. 30 years of very hard work, 30 years of projects, all of whom were somehow connected to the way the RNC was hosted in our community. From our Playhouse Square Theater District, to our arena, to our new public square, and all the new hotels and all the new housing that was critical to hosting that many people. We went after the RNC not because we wanted 100,000 people coming to our city, not because we wanted any political party. We went after both of them. We won the Republicans because they made a decision faster than the Democrats. We went after both. Our mayor was quoted as saying, "I would have gone after the Martians if they had a political party." We were ready. We had this image of Cleveland. We tested it. We polled it. We hired firms that told us, you know, people, we talked about this, people remember the river burning. So if you're going to change the image of Cleveland, you need a platform. You may not know that there was only one bigger press event meaning how many media people come to it to cover it. There's only one bigger than a political convention, and it's the Summer Olympics. We didn't think we were going to get the Summer Olympics soon, so we decided to go after the second biggest event and put everything we could as a community into it because we wanted the 15,000 media people in our town to tell a new story about our city. But again, it was a story that took us 30 years in the making, and we still have a long way to go. We've changed our image, but just like you know, it was interesting. The issues are all the same. It doesn't matter how big or small you are. Well, your issues, advocacy, education, workforce, all the very same issues that a city a little larger than you up north deals with every day. Our biggest project today is the Cleveland Municipal School District. And again, it was the partnership. You know, I don't know about you, but we were working on schools for 25 years. Every new flavor of the month we jumped on. For a while it was put your mayor in charge of your school system. You know, those elected, not to offend anybody, but the theory back then was the problem is you got elected school board members. Nobody knows who they are, so they're not accountable, so they don't care what kind of decisions they make. So we put our school system, only one in the state. Business community lobbied hard, only school system in the state run by our mayor. It had some improvements. It didn't fix anything. What was next? You all educators all know. Just create charter schools. The magic of competition will solve everything. Problem was, there were charter schools that were worse than the public schools, and nobody knew it because we created them, but we didn't tell anybody whether they were any good or not. That didn't fix it. What we really realized, and I want to end with this to see if there are some questions, what we realized, and this is what only you can do, you need to help your elected officials on these kinds of issues. The rules were broken, folks. As long as school districts, as long as businesses, if businesses had to follow this rule, as long as school districts can only make talent decisions based on how long someone has been a teacher, they can't succeed, in our opinion. So we changed the rule, only for the Cleveland School District. Tenure is no longer the dominant factor in deciding on who we hire in our district. And it's starting to make a change. That's not anti-teacher, but it's reflective of the fact that when you're running a big organization, you have to have an ability to hire the best people. Any enterprise does. And so we changed it. We'll come back in a few years with this major experiment and see if other districts in the state want to do the same thing. We'll see. But in Cleveland, it's already starting to work, as I mentioned, by the enrollment. So let me just make one more comment and then see if there's a few questions. Again, the passion for what you do, stay committed. You got to help your president. You got to see it was great to see the transfer of power. We just witnessed that last week. We do that well in this country. We need to do it at chambers. You need to stay engaged. You need to get your colleagues engaged, because I really do believe if you're going to continue to address the issues that you reflected when we were talking about workforce and so forth, it rests on whether you have active business leaders and committed public officials that are willing to do things together. And I believe that public officials can do a lot more and can take bolder steps when they have a partnership with all of you as they try to do that. So glad to see all of you. If I leave a little early, don't blame me too much for that. I have two sons at the University of Dayton, which are both waiting for a steak tonight. So I'm gonna run up there and see if I can take them to dinner. So any questions about anything I may have mentioned or something I didn't mention or anything about Cleveland? Anybody? Yep.
How big a role?
Mayor, right?
Mayor.
Mayor.
A mayor.
A mayor.
How big a role did the land bank play in terms of Cleveland's revitalization?
I would say huge, but getting bigger. The question was, how big of a role did something we have in our city called the land bank play? The land bank in our city is a vehicle by which vacant properties that are tax delinquent are actually purchased by a public entity, held in a pool, put together in larger pieces so that they can be sold to owners and developers to do more with them instead of just having them, stay vacant. It's been huge, but it's getting bigger because as the demand for housing in our town increases, those parcels are becoming more and more valuable. Unfortunately, just this week, one of the housing judge in our community that really played a key role in that, a gentleman named Judge Ray Pianca, just passed away this week, so it was a big blow. But it was much of his work that actually led to that effort, but huge. I shouldn't say that word. Anyway. Any others? Yep.
Joe, appreciate your message tonight. Would be curious, aside from the Browns finally having a winning season, what does success look like for Cleveland over the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, I have a very biased point of view on that, and I'll tell it to you. The answer from my perspective is to finally appreciate and leverage our lakefront, because it is an asset that almost every city in America, when you think about it, is on a river. We wouldn't be here if there, you know, I mean, let's just think back 200 years. You didn't have a river, you didn't have much of a commerce system, but lakefronts are very rare, and people don't know what an incredible resource it is. And, you know, back to politics, we have to be concerned, folks, because if you've watched demographics in our country, the Great Lakes have lost 15 members of Congress in the last 30 years. They're now in California, Arizona, Texas, and Florida. If that same trend continues, we better figure out a way to build the pipe to take the water south, because at least we'll be able to create jobs that way. We have to work together to protect what the Great Lakes means to all of us, and I don't think we do it at the level at which we must. And so to me, I think the reason development on the lakefront is so important is because it brings people to it, and that raises their appreciation levels for everything else that kind of body of water could do for us. So I think that's really, you know, we took advantage of it during that first 100 years. Unfortunately, we really took advantage of it. We have to do it differently for the next 100 years. So, thank you, everybody.